When I look back at the PC games of the late 90s and early 2000s, there's a distinct visual style that I believe truly stands the test of time. It's when the game employs pre-rendered graphics paired with an isometric perspective. Curious about what that looks like? Here, let me show you. Is it just me, or do these games look just as beautiful as they did over 20 years ago? The rich details, the handcrafted feel and level of cohesion all culminate into one of my favorite aesthetics of that era. Where did this style come from, you might ask? Well, allow me to explain. Back in the late 90s, real-time 3D graphics were still in its infancy. These early games were usually pixelated, lacked details and suffered low frame rates. Rendering complex scenes in real time requires a lot of processing power and memory, which many computers at the time simply didn't have. To achieve a higher level of fidelity, developers thought of a solution. They'd create highly detailed environments, characters and objects, then render them on powerful PCs as static images or sequences of images. All assets were created with a fixed isometric perspective. This means they are viewed diagonally from above. Despite their static nature, isometric pre-rendered graphics can create the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality through clever use of shading, lighting and perspective techniques. Since these games didn't require rendering most or any of their assets in real time, developers could pack them with far more detail than the true 3D counterparts. This particular art style was most prominently seen in role-playing, strategy and management games. I'd say the golden age started with the first Diablo in 1997 and ended around the start of 2003 with SimCity 4. Occasionally, you'd still stumble upon a game using this art style, but by the end of 2004 it had largely become obsolete. Which leads me to the question, why was this technique mostly abandoned by the mid-2000s? The whole reason this technique was used in the first place was due to hardware limitations. However, as we entered the mid-2000s, rapid advancements in new graphics hardware and rendering techniques emerged. These advancements made it possible to render 3D graphics in real time that didn't look like a slideshow.
It's pretty clean, smooth-looking animation considering, compared to the Doom type stuff.
Oh, how the times have changed. Another reason for the switch to 3D is the limitation of pre-rendered graphics in terms of interactivity and adaptability. As games evolved to become more complex, the use of pre-rendered graphics became increasingly impractical. The same applied to the development of pre-rendered graphics. If you wanted to change an asset, you couldn't simply tweak it, you had to fully re-render it. Being able to tweak a model within a couple of clicks meant developers could work a lot faster. You're inclined to think that was it for the aesthetic, right? Well, I'm happy to report it's made a bit of a comeback, especially in the indie scene. It seems I'm not the only one who still adores that pre-rendered look. Obsidian Entertainment released a game called Pillars of Eternity in 2015, developed by CRPG veterans like Josh Sawyer, Tim Kaine and Chris Avallone. Obsidian would drop 2 more games in this graphical style with Tyranny and Pillars of Eternity Deadfire. Another relatively recent game with an amazing pre-rendered art style is Disco Elysium. In this game, they went for a more painting-like aesthetic. Next up are the Brotherhood's games. They are an indie studio that made 4 adventure games in this style, called Kane, Stasis, Beautiful Desolation and Stasis Bone Totem. Then there are also games that keep the isometric perspective but don't use pre-rendered graphics and go for hand-drawn sprites instead, like all of Supergiant's games. Alongside all of these new releases, a lot of classic games have received the remaster treatment. This allows people to enjoy these timeless games on modern machines. And man, do they look beautiful on there. It's a testament of why hardware and budget limitations can produce some incredible art. In a world where AAA studios relentlessly pursue photorealism, nothing inherently wrong with that of course, I'm happy to see the preservation of these older games and the passing of the torch to create new ones. I've compiled a list of my favorite games in this style, that I think deserve your attention. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. Of course, there are plenty more games that use this art style, but this is a nice place to start. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble on about video game art. If you want to see more retrospective content like this, I'd really appreciate it if you like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm off to play some Desperados. Peace!
Hey,
Who are you?
there!
Get under cover!
It's now or never.